So hello everyone, and welcome to this discussion today as we focus on the growth and demand of Umhlanga Ridge Town Centre. So my name is Stefan Buerta from Rainmaker Marketing, and I'll be facilitating discussion with the panel you can see in front of you. And thanks, gents, for your time, and obviously I'll introduce you as we go. So I personally believe that Umhlanga Ridge Town Centre is one of the major success stories of the KZN property market. And it really underlines the significance that vision, urban planning, and ongoing management can have on the desirability of an area. So today we've got four parties who've literally been instrumental and significant in terms of the growth of this node over the years. And I think it's quite unique to have all of them around a virtual table, as we call it, and really excited to get their insights and stories in terms of the vision of where this precinct's got to today, and actually the whole surrounding area, and where it's going forward. So we want the discussion to be relaxed, we want it to be honest, we want it to be transparent. We really wanted you to walk away from this having unique insights that you may not have known before, and also hopefully a bit of a warm and fuzzy feeling around what can be achieved when you look at the partnerships between private and public sector along the way, and how significant this has been as a model of that. So we want to keep the chat engaging, and we really ask you to post as many questions as you possibly have. You can do that via the chat function at the bottom of your screen. And we're really going to try and get through as many of those questions as we can through the course of the session today. And we also know that internet is unpredictable at the best of times. So if you lose your internet connection at any stage and you get kicked out of the chat, all you need to do is just go back on the link and get back and straight back in. And the same will happen if I ask any questions to members of the panel and they struggle with connection at various points. All I'm going to do is just shift the question onto another member of the panel and get back to them once they are ready. And we know you're all busy. We know we're basically into second week of level 3 or third week of level 3. So we really appreciate everyone's time, but we're going to try and keep this about 45 minutes. And we've obviously got quite a lot to get through and a lot of insights that we want to try and extract. So before we get going with the questions, I just want to introduce the panel. If I could just ask you just to raise your hand when I mention your name. So firstly, just to Urki Wood, who's Director of Gap Architects and Urban Design. Hello. So they really have been the urban planners behind Gateway, Umhlanga Ridge Town Centre, Umhlanga Ridge Precincts, and really been involved right from the outset. And it's really interesting when you listen to this whole concept and how much planning goes into creating a precinct of this nature. Then Dina Maguna, who's the executive at Tonga Property. I think Tonga don't need much introduction, but they really have been the parties who've unlocked basically everything we see around Durban, from Cornubia through to Gateway, through to Umhlanga, Sabaya, Zimbali, and need to take so much credit for what's been created in terms of securely managed precincts within KZN. And KZN really has been at the forefront and leading the way in terms of this whole concept, which is very unique to the country. And I don't think Tonga can actually get enough credit for what's been created historically. Then Tarasik Soni, who's the Director of Trapezoid Property Development. Just within the Umhlanga Ridge Town Centre node, they've developed over 900 residential units and really have turned development into a bit of a science in terms of really getting to understand what the market's looking for and delivering around market demand. And then Malcolm Sinclair, welcome Malcolm, who is the General Manager of the Ridge Management Association. And it's when you understand what the role is in terms of security and maintenance and how it almost gets run as a privately managed municipality to an extent, it really is quite interesting. So welcome, gents, and thanks to all of you for your time.
Thank you.
So I'm going to jump straight into it. Malcolm, I'm going to kick off with you. And I think when we talk about the area of Umhlanga Ridge Town Centre, what area are we really referring to?
Well, thank you, Stefan. Yes, the Umhlanga Ridge sort of area, generally speaking, incorporates 5 different management associations. We talk loosely of around 2 million square meters of bulk, that, as you alluded to earlier, was pretty much proclaimed by Tongaat Hewlett's, planned with Tongaat, with Urki, and has been offered up for development. Those associations are in various stages of development, Office Estate Business Park being pretty much complete, Ridgeside Town Centre, or the Umhlanga Ridge Town Centre as we know it, and Parkside still under development. The area, interestingly, is somewhat upwards of 800 hectares, but accounts for around 9% of the eThekwini city rate space at the moment. So it's a very concentrated area, highly managed, and I think, again, as you said, great credit to Tongaat Hewlett, or Morelands in those days, for foreseeing the problems of management, ongoing management, after developers had come and created the value proposition.
And then Urki, so today we're focusing very much on Umhlanga Ridge Town Centre as a node. So how did the vision for that come about?
It would have been in the late 1990s, I guess around about 1997. I was already busy at that stage on the Umhlanga Ridge office estate, and I wasn't aware of what they were planning for a new town centre there. But at that stage, Gateway was seen as a much smaller shopping centre. I think only about 12,000 square meters as a local neighbourhood store. And the idea at that stage was very much a civic and little shopping centre kind of thing. When the Nellisons came from America to speak at a SAPOA conference, they turned Tongaat Hulits onto the idea of mixed use, new urbanism, and a town that should be for working in, for living in, and for praying and playing in. And so the idea of live, work, pray, and play all came together there with the Nellisons. And they were in the initial concept design team, as was Willie van der Veer at the time. And I then joined when the Nellisons were no longer available to that. So I'd overlapped with the Nellisons and worked with them on it. But then we took that concept forward into detail. And so we went on an overseas trip in 1999, in September of that year, just before the new millennium, to literally have a final look and see and decide whether we were good to go. And we came back from that trip knowing that what we had designed was the right way to be going, and we pushed the button on it then. So effectively 1999 represents the start of everything, I guess.
And how does what we see today compare with that initial vision that you and Tongaat had?
Remarkably, exactly, I would have to say. It's absolutely surprising. You know, one is so used to being wrong a lot of the time, but it seemed we got it right. What was extraordinary, though, was that we had no idea whether it would work. We honestly didn't. Neither the Tongaat Hulits team or the design team really knew whether we were going to pull this off or not. And the market was initially hesitant because we were talking about a totally greenfields thing. The shopping centre had come out of the ground, but the market still wasn't sure about this mixed use thing at all, much less this idea of vertical integration where you've got shops, offices, apartments, penthouses, and with a few hotels and things jammed in between that, all stacked on top of one another, effectively going back to that fantastic old way that cities have evolved over the years. And the market really wasn't sure about that. And so we learned as we went of how to take the market with us very gently, offer them comfortable things to begin with, and then start pushing them towards more and more achievement along the lines of the urban agenda that we were trying to promote. But I've got to say that it's absolutely, it's come out looking exactly what it said on the tin, so to speak.
And what excites you most when you drive through the town centre today?
Oh, well, it's just extraordinary. I mean, I think the most overwhelming thing is the sheer humility of and gratitude for having been involved in a project like this. You know, it's an extraordinary honor to have been on that team. It was a beautiful team to work with. The Tongaat Hulits people were fantastic. The engineering team were fantastic. All the marketing people at that time. It was a real team effort, and it was an honor to be part of that. And so I think when I drive around it, I just have an immense kind of pleasure. Of course, there's a strange thing about it too, is that I don't get to see it at leisure that much, because I'm there down from Johannesburg working on it for 2 or 3 days every second week. But I get let off for good behavior to go home to Johannesburg on weekends. So I don't get to see the town centre operating at that time when the residents are all working with the place. And it was overwhelming to me to go to the concert in the park recently, which was the first time I've ever been to one of those. And I was sitting there and just suddenly was overcome with emotion and kind of burst into tears. I didn't realize that we had achieved this, really, you know, when I saw what was happening. It was a fantastic experience.
So, and Delia, in terms of the shopping centre, Gateway Theatre Shopping, so I mean, everyone must have thought, like Urki said, that collectively you guys are all crazy to try and conceptualize a shopping centre of that size in 1998. And I know now it's almost doubled in size. How much of a catalyst was Gateway in terms of everything that's developed around it?
No, thanks, Steph, and thanks for the good introduction. And Urki keeps mentioning past tense. He keeps going to say the great team then. The team is still there. Urki Tonga Tilet is still there. It could be change of faces, really, you know. Yeah. Yeah, just to answer your question, though, Steph, for every development that you do, you would have to have anchors. Those that do shopping centers will tell you, even within the shopping center itself, you need to have anchor tenants. Without anchor tenants, you are gone. So Gateway was a catalyst and an anchor in the formation of that precinct. If you go 20 years back and you look at aerial pictures of Gateway, you won't believe it. When I say Gateway, because people call it Gateway, the Greater Umhlanga Ridge. You see sugarcane everywhere, and you see a tiny little road, which is the road that goes in front of your DSTV, your Deloitte, the square, going across, and then you should see a shack spot on the other end, and it takes you down to the hotels in the Umhlanga village. And all around it is sugarcane. In fact, up to 2008, even if you look at Ridgeside itself, you see sugarcane everywhere, you know. So we knew that Gateway would be the anchor. And it did become that anchor that we wanted it to be, because it draws people in, whether people want to work, live, and play, because it's either you're shopping in Gateway and therefore you're closer to the areas where you would shop, or you want to be closer to other activities. You know, I've had a question from a student, quite a lot of master's students that come visit us for interviews. One question was, is the Gateway precinct the new CBD? So I had to be correct, and I said to the student, no, it's not the new CBD. It's just the sprawl in a managed way, in a controlled environment, you know. But the reality is that the Gateway investors were visionaries themselves. They could have said, no, we can't pull this thing off. It's too much, and the whole thing could have collapsed. But back to what Urki has said also, there was a significant investment that was done from a research point of view to see how could we make it work, you know? And as you say, Steph, I mean, Gateway has doubled now in terms of, I'm talking in terms of size from what was initially developed, or the bulk that was sold to them, you know? And now you're talking numbers of around 200,000 or more within the Gateway itself, the Gateway site itself. So it's a similar thing. I would say watch the Njongweni urban development. I know we're talking Umhlanga, but it's a similar concept. You start up with a catalyst, which is a shopping center, and then you expand, and Urki is involved there. So that's my,
Okay. And then Malcolm, so obviously I mentioned earlier, the biggest strength of the KZN market has been the emergence of these securely managed precincts, which like I said, is quite unique. It's been adopted quite late around the rest of the country. So I think Ridge Town Centre is one of the best examples of this in the country. And just to explain to us what a securely managed precinct actually means.
All right, Stefan, yes. Again, within the various associations, different levels and approaches to security are maintained. For instance, in the office estates, you have to enter via access control. So those tend to be very simple and far easier to manage from a security perspective. Within Ridgeside itself, we have a number of different approaches to security, one being a gated sort of private property area, precinct 3 as we call it, that where the office estate is, and others, precinct 1 is open access. And of course, open access typifies both the town centre, the Umhlanga Ridge Town Centre, and Parkside. And I think Urki will agree that it's arguably our most difficult challenge to maintain and manage security in the open space and the public space. But it's also arguably one of our greatest successes in that if you can get that right in an open area, it is quite an achievement. And we achieve that with the help of 24/7 surveillance throughout all the precincts, security patrols, people on foot, and various security applications that we sense are in fact appropriate for the area. The last thing we want to do, or we don't want to ever portray an image where this is a policed state, so to say, and I say that very advisedly. It's not as though you can't move and operate freely, but we just require respect. So I think we've achieved an extraordinary amount, and again, it's the biggest, by far the biggest expenditure line item on any of the associations' income statement annually. Upwards of 50% in some cases is dedicated to security, the security operations. But we're always looking to better that. And I think particular buildings, and I know Rasik, you can talk to this perhaps, I know that in Parkside our job is made that much easier because each particular development also has its layer of security, which greatly assists us. We're then relegated to literally looking after the public space around those buildings. But it is the number one criteria, I think Rasik will agree, people want to live in secure areas. So we see quite a migration of people who've been in the suburbs and are now looking to for a more secure area as things become a bit more difficult perhaps. And Parkside seems to satisfy that requirement. We see a lot of folk coming in from the suburbs.
Just to pick up on what Malcolm was saying, I think it's something we're really proud of is that this is not a gated estate. It's not a gated village. It's a proper city with open access. All the roads and road reserves are handed over to the council. Those are public domain. And Malcolm's quite right that to get security to work at that level is paramount. And to have literally apartments coming down to sidewalk level, and in many cases apartments individually taking access off sidewalk is an incredibly hard thing to do in the South African context of this sort of neo-medievalism that we live in a way. But that's something I think we're immensely proud of, and I really would not want it any other way.
And then Malcolm, when we talk Ridge Management Association, what role does the Management Association play, and what is the benefit to people working or living within the area?
Stefan, yes, I think besides the obvious, if we go to all the various association memorandum and incorporations, the very first line item, the purpose of these associations is to protect and enhance members' value propositions, in other words, their property. So everything that we do is geared towards making sure that we look after members' properties and their investments, and we enhance it. And of course, that plays out very succinctly. Every transfer that happens in the town centre, the ridge side, everywhere, has to come through our office. So we have a very good idea of what properties are firstly sold for and then unsold for. And the growth has been remarkable over 20 years. Yes, there have been little incidences where, or times where the property price increases have been a little bit slower, but we have seen sort of a remarkable walk, inextricable walk up of property value. So we're doing something right. I think the less obvious that are just there anyway is that the area is clean. It is secure, of course. We create all sorts of amenities for our members. We manage the finances of the associations from this particular office, and we do that with a relatively small budget, funny enough, compared to a city, and with a core staff of 9 people. So I think we managed to get a lot done, I think, and it plays out in the value of members' properties when they come to sell, and that's hugely satisfying, I think, for the entire team, from the developers to Tongaat to the urban, all of us. I think we take great pride in seeing that happen.
And then Urki spoke about this mixed-use living, and I think now we have a sort of a total blend of residential, commercial, medical, hotels, retail. We've also got some big offices in there, CCI, Nedbank, Growth Point. So how does this whole integration work practically now that it's actually a reality?
Stefan, it works mostly to say that I don't believe that I've seen anything either in South Africa or sort of internationally on this scale and this complexity that works. Having said that, we would be the first to acknowledge that we sit with particular problems, and they are problems that can be solved. And again, one of the huge advantages we sat with at the very beginning, we have a very robust memorandum of incorporation, we have a robust set of conduct rules, and we have a development manual, which really are the three documents that were put together by Moorlands in those days and carried right through. And the boards look at these things from time to time and have the power to amend them to suit the situation. And by situation, I mean, we could have anticipated, for instance, 5-6 years ago, that call centers would have been a reality in the town center in a mixed use area. Now you need to, for yourself, just think about managing a 24/7 operation in a residential area and the collateral sort of the issues that you have to deal with, noise, transport. You know, it is difficult, but I say again, we do have the mechanisms whereby we can manage it. And of course, we have to go to those people and say, if you want to continue here, we don't want to treat you as third-class citizens, but you need to be respectful of the area and be respectful of all who make use of the area. So it is difficult, Stefan, but I think that we have by far and large managed to deal responsibly with these things with people who understand the problem.
Okay. So Rasik, just want to bring you in here. So Malcolm spoke about the property growth, and I know we've seen it. We've seen sort of almost close to 10% year-on-year growth the last couple of years, which is quite remarkable in a tough market. I mentioned you guys have delivered over 900 units just in that area, in a very, very small space over a few years. What is the initial reason for you guys to make such a heavy investment into one area?
Yeah, thanks. Hi. So look, our initial reason to actually move into the area was simply to invest, taking into account, remember that to a large extent, you know, the area was still green fields as such. And then this changed, you know, and over the years that went by, the area developed and the need for more residential increased, taking into account that the catalyst was Gateway Theatre of shopping and coming to understand the overall vision of live, work, and play. Also, you know, when you start to look at what Malcolm was talking about in managed estates, and you start to look at the living environment, and then, you know, how this was fast becoming the new CBD of the Greater Durban as we would like to see it, we then saw an opportunity that, you know, you're building or you're developing in a managed and secured environment that made it so much easier. And remember, as the years went, we somewhat learned more and more, because it's not something that you start off and you say, listen, we need to adapt and we need to learn what is the size, what is the needs, what are people looking for, what is the price, what is the square meterage. So as the years go by, you adapt and you learn. And that's exactly what we've done over the years. So each building to building will teach you something differently. And as a developer, what you need to do is to implement as you learn. And that's exactly to where we are as you see it today.
Okay. And then just a quick question around development. So your latest development, Ridge Town Central, which is now under construction, is the fastest selling development that the node has seen through, like I said, quite a challenging period. How much of that is you bundling all your knowledge of what the market wants into one product, and how much of it relates to where the node is now from a maturity perspective?
Yeah, you know, there again, Steph, that, you know, it's about a multitude of things coming together. The vision of the urban designer, keywords taking shape, the controls of the secured managed environment, together with our vision to deliver value to our clients. As Trapezoid, we are passionate about development, ensuring we engage at every level, from design, space management, fit out, and all other value items, staying true to the vision and delivering the best possible product. So, I mean, you always have to learn from your previous developments. What is the main thing that we're looking for? So, as Malcolm was saying earlier on, you know, in most of our developments, the core features that you'll see there is security, and that's exactly what the people are looking for. So while you're looking for space management, you're ensuring that, you know, you're fitting out these units to the best of your ability. You're also ensuring safety. And that is core principle that needs to come into play in any of our developments, that while we've got, you know, a larger security component managed from Malcolm and, so, you know, from the association point, that each building then needs to understand and secure itself. And you'll see that from many of our developments. So even going back to RTC and just going back to your question of, yes, we've learned from over the years, we've implemented exactly to what we've learned, and we brought all that back to RTC and tried to implement exactly what we're doing now.
Okay. So when it comes to nodes, I mean, we work in a lot of nodes around the country, and I say this without fail, that I believe that the area Parkside Umhlanga Ridge Town Centre is the most underrated residential node in the country. And I say that it's quite a bold statement, but just because people don't understand it and people have no idea how the rate of sales ticks over year and year, what drives that demand? Second, where are these people coming from in terms of those renting, but also those who are buying?
Yeah, you see, this, you know, when you try to understand that there's no particular area of migration, as the buyers and the renters are coming from all over, taking into account as the companies moved, the area developed, so did the need to increase in residential properties, taking into account that some clients were downsizing into secure environments and others were starting up in life. So it was a migration from all areas, and also understanding that, as we call this, the so-called new CBD, that people are going to migrate to this area, because you're then now coming to understand that your catalyst is gateway theater of shopping. You've got this live, work, and play situation. You're always going to have that migration from other areas coming to here. So in particular, there's no A area that we can pin down to say, listen, they're all coming from there. It's from all over. As the companies moved across, so did the people.
There's an interesting thing too, that I think people like Rasek, etc., those small scale developers as well deserve enormous credit for this town centre. They've really had the courage to do very important things. You know, there's something peculiar about eThekwini that makes this mixed use model work, I think. If you look at Johannesburg and look at Cape Town, they're very institutionally run cities in many ways. You've got big players who stick to core business. They either do a shopping centre or an office park or an office building. They very seldom do residential, and they will never put those things together. They stick to their knitting and do one thing at a time. In a way, in a fairly simple model. In Durban, there's this extraordinary thing where I've been sitting at having beers with people where these syndicates have just formed. A few guys sitting around saying, why don't we just buy some bulk from Tongaat? Let's do a development. And they don't have a core business. They don't care if it's residential or retail or office, etc. The only core business is, how do you get an architect to work on risk until you've got this thing to a 75% pre-sale off plan, and then you take it to the bank, and the bank says, what a pleasure. And I think that's the courage of Durban. You don't see this level of mixed use in Cape Town or in Johannesburg. You know, they tried it with things like Melrose Arch, Century City, etc. But in spite of those cities having great institutional memory of mixed use, no one's really got the guts to do it. Durban's been amazing that way.
Yeah, and agreed. And I think, and a collective amongst developers understanding that there's a sweet spot in the market, and if you can deliver that price point, and like you say, value engineering where you can, it's always going to attract the markets. So
and of course, the interesting thing is too, these markets never run together. The market's always doing one or other thing. And, you know, there were times we were really so anxious to get our first residential component into the town centre because everyone was doing retail or offices. After a while, residential started running like crazy to the point where we had to keep reminding people that they were actually allowed to do offices as well if they wanted to. And I think that's been fundamental to the success of the town centre as well, is because the property markets move in at different levels in all these different sectors, it's always been available and open for business regardless of what the market is doing at any given time.
So just a comment for you guys, just so you know, I don't know if you've seen the comment, but just from Blake Biden saying, hi gents, good to see you all again. Great job at delivering a quality precinct. Take care. I'm sure you guys all know Blake. And then, and Delia, I'm going to pass this on to you, and maybe if guys want to come in too. So it's from Akash Maharaj. It just says, what is next for the town centre? How will you make it more attractive for holiday makers and investors?
No, thanks, Steph, for that question. You know, you always get these questions, people wanting the next thing. And there's a simple saying that don't change what's right, you know. At the moment, the town centre is delivering. It's a mixed-use concept that is working. I think why is it working? It's because of the way it's been put together to allow some flexibility, you know. I think the next thing is we're getting to making it more of a brownfields rather than a greenfields development, because you almost sold out in terms of land parcels that are in the area, is to say, how do you densify, taking into account the city's strategy on densification and the BRT routes that are coming through. In fact, they cut through the Umhlanga Ridge Town Centre, connecting communities, different communities. So the next big thing is focusing on that densification, and Eki can come in. We keep saying we're actually starting to exceed your cent in bulk in terms of the thinking and the strategy, and taking that initial strategy that was started about 2 decades ago to say to the next level. So the next thing is focusing on densification, is focusing on making sure that the networks work in the area. I'm talking pedestrian friendly, connectivity, easy access to city, Durban Central, to the airport and all of that. So that's the focus, and Malcolm will come in also from managing that bigger animal, because it becomes a bigger animal as you add all of those things.
So can I just ask a bit more on that? Obviously, it's a big component. We all know this BRT in terms of the linkage through from Bridge City to Cornubia into Newtown, and then obviously out to the airport into town. Where are we with that from a city perspective?
Yeah, okay. I'll give my bit, and then Eki can come in. I think from that perspective, Steph, how I hoped the head of ETA, Tami Manyati or Rocky, were here to eloquently articulate that, because that's their space. We were trying, but I think we actually failed in our try to get them because of how busy people are. The link between Pinetown and Bridge City is there. Infrastructure is installed. Yes, it's not operational yet because there's issues about procuring buses and other things. And that link actually leads to a link between Bridge City and Cornubia Town Centre, Umhlanga Ridge Town Centre, which is being finalized from a design point of view, but there will also be a link to the King Shaka International Airport, which I think, in my view, would have to link with the Sibaya Coastal Precinct, noting that there's a university coming up there. You end up with 5,000 students. How do you transport those students between the nodes? And those engagements are taking place with the city, between Tongaat and the city. We've seen what the BRT has done in Gauteng from a network connectivity point of view. And I know, Malcolm, you wanted Eki to come in as well on that.
Yes, I think Erki has been, we have been chatting, and Erki, I think, might have a little bit more about the BRT, that may be more up to date, Erki.
And Erki, just to add to that, sorry, there's actually a question from Jeffrey Richards, and I think it ties exactly what you're saying now. How well do you think public transport has been integrated in the town centre? I think it's all linked to probably your answer now.
Yeah, the greatest failure of the town centre to date has been the lack of public transport. And it's typically an enormous frustration for us, because that's the piece that we can't get right. You can't design public transport around a node without a much, much bigger regional input. And fundamentally from authorities whose business is providing public transport. And we are still way too private car based, and we all look forward to that possibility of public transport taking a far greater hold. We've made ourselves available for whatever public transport will come our way, and right now the prospect is going to be the delivery of the integrated rapid bus system fairly shortly. We've we've analysed probably 3 or 4 different routes through the city centre or through the town centre with the eThekwini Transit Authority, and are still looking for finality on that in many respects. But planning is proceeding apace, and in fact, everything's gearing towards implementation, we hope, fairly shortly. We of course also have longer term views of if and when there's ever an equivalent of a car train. Absolutely, that has been looked at so that that would come through underneath the town centre, and we know where we would want that station, if you like, the central station, to pop up and be part of the town centre. That's all been looked at and allowed for.
Okay. And what I'd maybe suggest is that we, from our side, will get updated timelines from the city and just send it out to everyone in this chat as part of the post-webinar debrief.
Yeah.
I think it is quite relevant. I know it's come up quite a bit here. Kavish, Harilal, and a few others have asked the same question.
Yeah. There's another aspect to public transport, of course, and that is non-motorized transport. That's people on foot and people on bicycles. And we are certainly looking at how, with Malcolm, to see how we can start to get a smart bike system into the town centre. As you know, there are really only 2 kinds of mayors in the world. There's a mayor that has an integrated bike system, and there's a mayor who wishes he had an integrated bike system. And so we're looking to do that now and starting to mobilize planning around that stuff now as well. But this idea of actually not making commuting unnecessary must be our first prize, that we effectively can live and work in the same place and find pretty much everything we need, where walking is the default, and getting into a private car is less and less necessary going forward.
So Malcolm, I actually want to bring you in, because I think we talk about the walking and the cycling, and I'm all for exactly what Erky said. I think there's a new way of thinking. I do believe in future, also controversial, is that when people start equating the cost of cars and then started comparing the cost of being able to ride and cycle and walk and use Uber when you need to, people might start doing the sums in future and actually realizing that the need to own a car is different. And maybe we're not there yet, but we certainly, things might change. But it comes down to security at the end of the day. And I know there's a question here for Robert Duncan, and it's really relevant. Why do residents feel safe living and working in this precinct? And how is level of crime managed through proactive security measures? And I think just to add to that, I mean, I know there's so many kids' play parks and walking areas and running trails. How is it that those areas can be safe and secure?
Stefan, yeah, good question. I'll say again, I think I'd like to just temper that question with relative. You know, we can never guarantee absolute safety for anybody, but by golly, I think the lengths to which we go must suggest, and of course we sit monthly with SAPS and look at the crime statistics around the area, this area and others, and we are a fraction of that. So I have to say that the mere facts that we look at bears out the very point that it's much safer to live here than in many other areas around the greater eThekwini area. We are constantly looking at ways of improving safety. For instance, Erky will tell you that we're looking at a new level of street lighting, a new order of street lighting for the pedestrians rather than into the street. And the idea is that people need to feel safe, that they are encouraged to walk. And I'd be the first to say that I don't think we've quite hit the mark yet in terms of the street lighting in the residential component of the town centre, for instance. So we are looking at those projects where we invite this sort of comment or suggestion from our members, and it's our role and duty to in fact explore it and then see if we can implement. The town was also set out by Gap Design, Erky and his team, as to be pedestrian friendly. Now, we also know that we live in a mad car culture almost in KZN for some reason. So, you know, people speed and really are not very conscious of pedestrians. So right now we've worked with the eThekwini Transport Authority to put in a complete set of raised pedestrian crossings throughout the town centre to slow the traffic down, to make it more pedestrian friendly. More than that, we've also are looking at installing a second order of CCTV surveillance on buildings, on the residential buildings, which we have a We have a servitude on each building at a certain height to be able to do that as an association, not to be prying, but rather to enhance the surveillance that we have already on the street. So if we see something happening, we can immediately respond to it.
One of the things to remember about security too, there, Stefan, is that it's not simply about how you police and monitor and control. Fundamentally embedded in the development manual and everything you see in the town centre is this idea of eyes on the street. Every building is required to be what is referred to as responsive architecture. So if there are apartments, we encourage living rooms, kitchens, places where you stand washing dishes. You're looking out onto the street all the time. One of the things we encourage is curbside parking, because one of the biggest investments you have in a town centre is your private car. The fact that it's sitting at curbside is a good reason to be looking out into the public environment and having an interest in what's going on there. So that natural surveillance is embedded in the whole design of the town centre. And I think where we have failure, it's where people have turned their backs on the street. We see it all the time. This isn't theory. This is real stuff. You know, it comes out of the hard laboratory of building cities.
Yeah. And I mean,
from my side, Steph, just one comment on this, it would be without wasting time. When we were planning the Umhlanga area, we actually looked at a document called CPTED, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. I would encourage everyone to just look at that document. It's available on the net and everywhere else. It was applied a lot in Australia. So it actually helped from a security point of view, as Eki was saying, it's how you design. So we focused more on the design of the building rather than retrospectively coming in and saying, you've got these buildings that are like this. How do you make sure now there's no blind spots on them? So that document helps a lot to just give you a checklist of what are the items you should be taking into account in the design, in the urban space design itself, not just the building.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's maybe even a document that we could share. And it's just interesting, there's a comment here from Anonymous that says, hi everyone, I live in Gateway at the moment and really enjoyed it. Since lockdown, the increase in cyclist runners and dog walks have been seen the precinct have been incredible. And just literally around how one encourages people to be more active in the precinct. I think that's really positive. Rasik, just a question for you. It's from a Tish Gopal, and it just says, how many units do you still have units available and units available for viewing?
Okay, at this point in time, we don't. We're fully subscribed. But obviously with RTC, we've got the new development coming up, and we will be able to show a particular furnished unit at this point in time. Because remember, taking into account that we've held some for rental basis and for day letting and so forth at Savannah Park. So yes, we more than welcome to actually show him a fully furnished unit and what it'll look like more or less with RTC. Okay,
perfect. And then, Andile, I think just a last question for you. I think we're going to have to start wrapping up, although, I mean, I wish we could go on because I think there's so much to explore. But just in terms of the other infrastructural drivers that are happening in the surrounding areas that will have an impact and that will complement Umhlanga Ridge Town Centre, can you just maybe just touch on those?
Yeah, no, thanks, Steph. I think one of the things I just want to mention is the issue around how we have actually structured ourselves. We made sure as an organization that we are agile, and we integrate and collaborate. We would have not achieved what we've achieved in the Umhlanga Ridge Town Centre without that agility, integration, and the collaboration, because we've been engaging with city, we've been engaging with key stakeholders, and being able to shift and change depending on market designs. So there's this saying that if you've got a good strategy, if you don't execute that strategy properly in a flawless way, then you are as bad as somebody who hasn't had a strategy, So I think the strategy worked because of the flawless execution that was done there. From an infrastructure point of view, I think majority of the infrastructure is already in. It's just focusing now on what I term the soft infrastructure, the issues around the environment. How do you better look after the environment, sustainability issues, By the way, even my thesis was on Umhlanga for my master's and looking at the environment and the value that's created through the public space management and that environment. If you don't look after the environment, that's why the people are querying security and issues like that. So it's not the hardcore, what we call bulk services like your water, electricity, sewer, Now it's the soft services, your environment. How do you deal with issues of pollution? How do you deal with issues of space management and maintenance itself? Malcolm has mentioned the maintenance issue. I, in my view, think it's unsurpassed. The way the open spaces have been managed in the Umhlanga Ridge, it's been unsurpassed. We've had people come from, by the way, a lot of people don't know this, the waterfall developers and the Mall of Africa in Gauteng, they actually visited us wanting to know how have we developed the Umhlanga area. They met with us at Tonga. We spent about 2 to 3 hours with them. We then took them to Malcolm's office. We spent another 3 to 4 hours. So the whole day was taken by them asking questions and wanting to understand certain things. So it's not just the infrastructure, the hard infrastructure, but the other things that you are doing from a security point of view, as already mentioned, and that sort of soft escaping, making sure that people feel free when they walk in the area and they feel free to invest in the area. And the outward looking, allowing development to spread beyond Umhlanga, removing the so-called boundaries to say, this is our Umhlanga Ridge area and therefore everything. No. You integrate communities, you advance diversity and unity, and therefore different communities survive. I mean, there's inclusionary housing units within the Umhlanga Ridge. Those inclusionary housing units were brought about because we wanted this integration and making sure that other people are fitting into what you've planned in the town. I've said quite a lot in a short space, but.
No, and I guess that master planning also is created to link with Ridgeside as Ridgeside develops. And obviously we've got Umhlanga Archie, Hilton Hotel, all those things coming in on the eastern side. And then obviously Cornubia Mall and everything else within there. So, I mean, I guess it's all part of one master plan.
Right.
Yes, it's exactly that.
Yeah. Stefan, quite an interesting thing to notice as well is that Gateway as a shopping centre was the first shopping centre, I think, with the courage to crack itself open and to emit energy rather than just soak in energy. And that, in fact, of course, then drove the property market as a catalyst. It's now had that value reflected back on itself, and we see that. So again, this isn't theory anymore, this really works. But what's really interesting to note, and I'm working on 3 or 4 of those at the moment, is that the big centres in other parts of the country, particularly in and around Gauteng, are looking to see how to crack themselves open now and effectively become town centres in their own right. And how do they become integral to the town centre rather than an enclosed shopping centre introverted around a mall with bags of sterile parking around them. And that's a trend that's catching on very strongly now. How do you become part of a community as a shopping centre?
Okay. So everyone, I think unfortunately we're gonna have to wrap up, and I really thank the panel for their time. I think it's been a huge amount of insight, and it really makes me very, very proud to be a Durbanite when I listen to stuff like this, and it's hell of inspiring to see how visions can come together. And obviously the planning and everything else is coming into the guys who've really, really invested into the area. And yeah, I think I thank you on behalf of so many people who live in and around the area. And I think what we're going to do is we're obviously going to send a follow-up mail to everyone who's been on this webinar, which will have a link and a live recording, so you have an opportunity if you've missed anything or joined late or joined early, and you can share it on to other people. We'll send you the details, the document that Adida spoke about, details for Ridge Town Central in terms of our sectors, opportunities going forward. And I think anyone who's either already invested in the node or potentially invested in the node, I'm sure you would have got a huge amount of comfort and insight listening to the team today. And just, I mean, just the planning and everything else. So I thank everyone. Thanks for your time, those of you joined. And we hope you have a wonderful afternoon and that you stay safe and sound.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Cheers. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.